In today's lesson, we are going to learn how to solve quadratics by the method of completing the square. So before we do that, we're going to review perfect square trinomials. So perfect square trinomials have the form of this a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So let's see what it would look like would be, here's an example, 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. So this is when we are factoring and we have these perfect squares on the outside. And if we square root them, the square root here would be 2x, and then the square root here would be 3, and this is a binomial squared. Then you can always check 2 times 3 is 6, and then double it, there's your 12. So factoring perfect square trinomials is going to come in handy in today's lesson. Here is our first example, x squared plus 10x minus 11 equals 0. So solving by graphing, factoring, and quadratic formula, we always want it equal to 0. Well, now we're going to change it up. The constant at the end, we're going to move over. So I'm going to add 11 to the other side. X squared plus 10x, I'm going to leave myself some space, equals positive 11. What I'm going to do is create a perfect square trinomial. And we're going to do this using a special formula, which is b over 2 squared. Your b value is 10. So 10 divided by 2 squared is 25. That is my magic number that if I add it here, I will create a perfect square trinomial. But if I'm going to add something to my equation, I have to add it to both sides of the equal sign. So I will rewrite this as x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 11 plus 25 is 36. I am now going to factor this perfect square trinomial that I just created. So this factors to square root the first term, there's my x. Square root the last term, there's my 5, plus, so it's plus x plus 5 squared equals 36. Now I'm going to solve using algebra. I need to solve for x. I have this exponent to this power 2. So to get rid of it, I'm going to square root both sides. So on the left, I'll have x plus 5 equals, when you're solving for x and you use the square root, you have to do this plus or minus. The square root of 36 is 6. And then to finish solving, minus 5 minus 5. So what I have is this x equals plus or minus 6 minus 5. So what this means is I have 6 minus 5, which is 1, and I have negative 6 minus 5, which is negative 11. Those are my two solutions to the quadratic. All right, let's go through these steps one more time. X squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 12. So the constant term at the end, I want to move it over. So I will subtract 15 on both sides. X squared minus 8x, I'm going to leave myself some space, equals 12 minus 15 is negative 3. Once you have it set up, we're doing that formula. This b over 2 squared. Negative 8 over 2 squared. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. Doing this formula is what's going to create a perfect square, but as long as I add the same number to both sides, I'm not changing my equation. X squared minus 8x plus 16 equals negative 3 plus 16 is 13. Once you've created your perfect square trinomial, factor your perfect square trinomial. So this goes down to x and 4. This is minus, so I need minus here. Squared equals 13. Once it's factored, you can square root both sides. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 13. 13 is not a perfect square, so I can just leave it in there. And then to get x by itself, I need to add 4 and add 4. So I'm going to write over here, x equals plus or minus the square root of 13 plus 4. So you could leave it like this. That's like your exact solution. For this lesson, we're actually going to evaluate and round just to kind of practice another way. So I'm going to have the square root of 13 plus 4 and negative square root of 13 plus 4. So we're going to type that in our calculator and round to the nearest hundredth. This one ends up being 7.61, and this one ends up being 0.39. Last example, and I'm going to add a couple things in here. This one's going to be a little more challenging. 4x squared minus 28x plus 49 equals 5. First thing is move our constant over. We're going to subtract 49 on both sides. 4x squared minus 28x equals negative 44. So I didn't mention this before, but this method's only going to work if the leading coefficient is 1. So I need to divide all terms by that leading coefficient. So x squared minus 7x equals negative 11. Let's do the special formula. Negative 7 over 2 squared. So I'm not going to have a super nice number. Squaring a fraction means you just square the numerator and the denominator, so that goes to 49/4. Add that to both sides. X squared minus 7x plus 49/4 equals negative 11 plus 49/4 ends up equaling 5/4. Next step is to factor. So I have x and I have minus. Okay, the square root of this term, you just square root both, and it goes back down to 7/2. Squared equals 5/4. Square root both sides. So x minus 7/2 equals plus or minus. Now, the square root of 5/4 is the same thing as square root of 5 over square root of 4, which is square root of 5 over 2. So I'm going to write that as plus or minus square root of 5 over 2. Last step, add the 7/2 to both sides. So x equals plus or minus square root of, I have a common denominator, so I can do square root of 5 plus 7 over 2. So that would be how you would leave your exact solution. But like I said, we're going to actually evaluate this and just practice rounding just for another method here. So square root of 5 plus 7 divided by 2 equals 4.62. And negative square root of 5 plus 7 divided by 2 is equal to 2.38. Okay, so there is a full lesson on solving quadratics by completing the square. Good luck.